I'm very excited to be able to welcome our next guest here off the podium because we haven't had somebody from his sport on this show in 5 years. You've got to go all the way back to 1997, 2017. Jesus, I'm not going back that far. When we had Tom Burton on the show, one of our very first guests we ever had on Off the Podium. And we're going to be talking a little bit more today about sailing with somebody who has won 5 world championships, 2 Olympic medals in the 470 class. And I'm so excited to learn a little bit more about his journey in the sport in general, and to get us pumped and excited for the sport of sailing, because I feel it's been a while that we've actually got excited about the sport here on Off the Podium. It's a pleasure to welcome to the show William Ryan. I'm just going to say, Will, welcome back. Well, welcome to Off the Podium. I'm flustered, Will. It's been a while since I've talked to sailors, so clearly I'm speaking shit today. So welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ben, and nice to see that you're at least very enthusiastic about our sport, even if nobody else is. So, no, privileged to be here. Thanks.
I'm trying to just completely ignore all the pre-production stuff that happened in the lead up to that interview introduction there. So the joys of recording this, but no, I'm pumped because we have some fun with sailing during the Olympics here and Off the Podium because it's a sport that I'm sure, it's not necessarily that everybody's tuning in prime time for the Olympics, are they? Australians, we're watching swimming, we're watching, cycling, and then all of a sudden I think it gets to about day 10 and we start winning medals in sailing and everyone's like, oh my God, sailing, yes, we're winning medals. So can we change this? Is this what we're here to do today, Will? Is to maybe get people to go like, no, day 1, we're watching sailing, bugger the swimming, we need to get pumped for this sport instead.
I wish that would be the case, but I think even I'd be more inclined to watch the other sports on day 1, the Olympics. I'm absolute sport addict, and I thoroughly enjoy watching the guys kind of crack into it in the early days of the games. And for us in sailing, we're quite fortunate that our sport kind of drags over a couple of days because it gives us the chance to watch some others get through a few pre-race nerves and kind of find our feet in that big arena. And it's nice given the situation as last time. It meant that we're at the Olympic Games for a lot more days than what some other athletes were. So, brownie points for us.
Very much so. Exactly. That's a good way of looking at it because it's actually really interesting. I remember it was at London where the swimmers hadn't done very well. There was a few other sports where we weren't living up to expectations. And then lo and behold, it was up to the sailors basically to get us a couple of gold medals to really get exciting. So I think right now we just need to take a moment to thank sailing at the Olympics from an Australian perspective because, again, it's a sport that always saves Australia. So no matter what people, attention span they have from it, it is the sport that saves Australia at the Olympics. So it's important to always acknowledge that.
I'll jump in on that because, the 2012 Olympics, I wasn't at, but I rang up a radio station and told them the sailors were going to win some medals, and I won a $40 fuel voucher, which I wish I'd saved until now because it'd be worth a lot more. But no, it's a nice place to be for our sport. It's not a sport that has a huge following, but it's something that I think a lot of people actually connect with, particularly in Australia. Everyone's kind of close to the water, and for the older generation, most people can remember where they were when Australia 2 won the America's Cup some long time before I was born, but some years back. And it's nice, I think, in this last Olympic kind of quads, the last 4, it's been really cool that the sailors are under pressure and in a very different venues each time. At least one of us has managed to come through with some goods and some silverware. And it's nice to keep the sport on the map.
I'm very intrigued about this $40 voucher. So, what was it? Like a competition of guess what sport we're going to win medals in or something like that? And were you just like, hey, I've got an inside knowledge. This sailing sport's pretty good for us, so keep an eye on it.
Randomly, they actually used Swedish words, and you had to say, was it something that was sold at IKEA or not? And I don't know how I ended up in this little competition, but no, it was a morning segment, which must have been why they were desperate for callers, and somehow I got through. So big day.
Wow, very big day.
It was the last thing I won before the Olympics, I think.
Well, I was going to say the last 3 Olympics you've had pretty success: gold medal, silver medal, and a $40 fuel voucher. I mean, again, as you said, what's worth more nowadays? I'm going to say the fuel voucher.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah,
honestly, the silver medal got me a medium-sized cappuccino at one of my favorite coffee shops back home in Australia. And unfortunately, I haven't made it back to Australia yet, but I'm really hoping it's going to be a large after all these years.
Bloody hell.
In the sport.
Well, you've answered one of my questions. I always like to ask, do you get free shit with your medals? And I mean, a silver medal gets you a medium coffee. So, hey, that works.
I was honestly pretty happy with that, actually. So
Yeah. Some people are
maybe I
happy
should
with,
set my standards higher for the future, though.
I think you should, maybe, because, I mean, wasn't some of the Tokyo Olympians I saw got cars when they got back? So, I mean, if you haven't been back to Australia, maybe there's a car waiting for you at the airport, essentially.
I think that's my ploy from now. The more I drag it on, the bigger I'm expecting the prize purse to be when I get back to Australia. So, yeah, I hope lots of people listen to this podcast.
Oh, well, through the roof. You're going to get it. I mean, I think Ariane Titmus is going to get kicked off those Harvey Norman ads, and they're going to get you on there instead. So you might get a free kitchen top or, counter or something along those lines. So, wow. Geez, the untapped market of you getting... There's just so much stuff waiting for you, Will. Get back to Australia already. Come on.
I think that those electronical appliances, at least they're more relevant to the sailing market. You can't do much with a kettle or a hairdryer when you're actually at the swimming pool. So I think if you got those leads at Harvey Norman, send them my details, please.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, look, we're hugely connected on this show now. So yeah, we'll be sure to pass that on. But I mean, I love your journey in the sport, the story that you've told so many times about the fact that you were 2 years old essentially when you got into sailing. So for the people who haven't seen all the other interviews with you, tell us how you got into sailing as a 2-year-old. 2-day-old, I should say, not even a 2-year-old. 2-day-old, thank you, yes.
Hugely fortunate. I think it's always the people around you that kind of guide so much in your life. And my grandfather, who's been a huge role model in my life and continues to be, he had a yacht, and I was born just prior to Christmas, and family didn't want to let my birth get in the way of a good party. So I think they dragged me along and took me out on Sydney Harbour at only a few days old. And my family are predominantly Newcastle based, so it'd been an effort for them to take the boat down, and a cool way to celebrate it, because it's funny that was such a pinpoint mark in my life in the journey that I've taken now. But for many years, it never seemed relevant, because my father was a rugby union player. He had high hopes that there'd be me followed by 14 more boys, and we'd have our own family rugby team and go on to great things. But yeah, for those who haven't seen a picture of me, I'm about 6'3" and don't weigh a whole lot. So I wasn't going to make it very far in the rugby, despite my best efforts to play for many years. Finally, Mum let me off the hook and said I could change sports, and kind of stumbled back into sailing in my later years, probably 13 or 14 years old, which is late to the sport in many respects. But I think for me, the passion that is linked to the sport is rooted with those memories of being with my family and having a good time. And for me, I think that's what has helped me survive in the sport at a high level, and the pressures that come with it is that even in those tough days, you kind of remember the good moments, and yeah, it's always another day tomorrow, and it might be better weather and not as cold.
I like this sort of notion, though, that you go in that great Boxing Day tradition of Sydney to Hobart, there in Sydney Harbour. I'm just thinking that if you were a Victorian and maybe you got taken to the MCG on a Boxing Day test, we could be talking about a completely different sport than that. Maybe this was just ingrained as 2-day-old. Will, like, boom, I'm going to get into this sport eventually. Could have been a cricketer basically one day instead if you're in a different state.
No, I'm not very good at cricket, so I was lucky I found sailing.
that connects that way. Which it's kind of, when you get into sailing and you start to take it up, the different paths I guess you can take in the sport, because do you sort of look at it as, okay, I want to do a certain type of sailing to become an Olympian? Is there that path of I want to go into, say, the America's Cup, or I want to go into like Sydney to Hobart? Like, is there certain decisions that you make along the way as a young athlete, or does that sort of come to you once you realize what type of sailing you want to go towards?
Yeah, I think like the whole concept of sailing is a bit of a bizarre one in a way. There's not many pastimes that people do to go from point A back to point A. Normally when you do something, you want to do it with a purpose and to go somewhere, but sailing very much is around just enjoying those moments in the water, and just the experience. I think it obviously comes with champagne and strawberries and beanbags like you see in all the commercials, as does Olympic sailing. But no, for that younger age, I think it's just a great way to connect with a broader fan group or friends group, and you learn a skill that's a skill for life. You can kind of do this right until you're in your old age. My grandfather's 90, coming up to 94 now, and he's still regularly out in the water, and it's just great to see him do that. And at the same time, it's something that we can enjoy all as a family from my personal experience. But whether you end up on a family holiday to Croatia for a couple of days or yacht week, like that little subset skill of sailing kind of comes in handy, even knowing which way to hold the umbrella in a big rainstorm. It's good to know where the wind comes from. So
Probably.
for the journey into yeah, exactly. So unless you're Mary Poppins, it doesn't matter. But the journey into the sailing, it's kind of just a great way to enjoy being out in the nature, I think. But as you go along, there's so many options, and it's a good thing and a bad thing about our sport because there's so many different types of boats. It's hard almost to say, like, who's the best or how do you get the best competition, because there's multiple divisions and different places and all the rest of it, but it does make it accessible, and that's what's probably so great about it. And there's an ethos that they actually have carried through to the Olympic Games. So virtually in the Olympic Games, there's 10 divisions or 10 different disciplines of sailing. And it could be windsurfing or kite surfing. Catamaran, which has 2 hulls. There's a boat that's 1 person on their own. There's others with 2. There's mixed teams. There's different kind of aspects to the same subset sport. But for the Olympic journey, for me, it kind of came out of the blue. I had ambitions of doing the cruising with the champagne and strawberries, like we spoke about before. But a chance meeting with my now coach, Victor Kovalenko, and just happened to be in the yacht club in Sydney Harbour and crossed paths with this elderly gentleman, and he kind of looked at me and kind of asked me like how much I weighed, and which I thought was a bit weird, but in a very strong Ukrainian accent. And I was like, okay, seems like a nice guy.
Stranger danger didn't, new alarms didn't go off. This older gentleman asked me how much I weighed. Like, I feel my parents told me not to get involved in these situations.
Yeah, clearly a poor upbringing. I'll speak to mum about that one. But no, he honestly was just sizing me up to understand a little bit about my character. And I was totally oblivious to it at the time, but he asked me a few questions and what I was up to. And that was kind of really the beginning of my Olympic campaign. I think he decided it before I did. And he kind of said, come back here tomorrow and you're going to sail this 470 thing. And I knew about the Olympics and kind of followed it and knew Australia had a hugely rich heritage in the sport. But it wasn't a sport that kind of featured for me in 2000. And I think that was really where sailing had developed and built its legacy from in Australia. And I'm well aware of that now, but at the time I was very naive and had no idea who this guy was, who just happens to be the most successful Olympic coach of all time in sailing. They call him the medal maker. And so, yeah, just a chance meeting. And yeah, it was one that I'll be so hugely grateful for the rest of my life, because not only did it lead me down an opportunity to not have to do my mid-semester exams at university, which was my primary goal at the time. But it led me to learn a lot about myself, meet some amazing people, and the chance to represent Australia, which I think I'll be incredibly proud of for the rest of my life.
It's insane. It's incredible to think that you have a meeting with someone like that who maybe might need to work on his first introduction skills to young boys, but we can talk about that another time.
That's definitely true. And girls are no better. You can't ask a girl how much she weighs. It just doesn't go down well. I've told him multiple times. just be careful how you introduce yourself. But it's fascinating you bring up Sydney, because you would have been, about 12 around Sydney, and, I was 13. I mean, anybody of our age, anybody in Australia really at that point knows how much it took over the country. And I don't know, like, if you were Olympic obsessed. I was that weird kid who was very Olympic obsessed. I could name every medalist, probably to this day. If you quiz me on the gold medalist from Sydney, I could probably remember each of them. And obviously that included a couple of sailors. So, they became very prominent. But it's sort of interesting that if you sort of got a background where you maybe do a bit of sailing, that I guess you're not really focusing a lot on those and become such an important part of your life. You join them, 16, 20 years later as Olympic medalists. So is that something that now, knowing that history, going back, as you're saying, that's kind of where it really started things? Like, have you had an opportunity to meet those guys from Sydney and kind of rub shoulders with them and kind of say, hey, I'm in your club now because look at me, I've got medals as well? Yeah, no, I think for sure for me at that time in my life, I was looking at the Matt Burke and John Eales, thinking that was who I wanted to be in my later or coming years. But I think, like all boys around that time, we all remember the women's hockey team. All these fun girls running around looking pretty fit. All upset because Kieran Perkins didn't get to win again. But
and also Tatiana Grigorieva. I was very into pole vaulting in 2000.
it's a sport a lot of people have learned a lot about over the years.
I know. Yep.
But the swimming was probably the phenomenal one for Australia, and I think that was what probably carried through in my memories from that games. But yeah, as I've come into my later years, the first Olympic gold medal I have ever actually got to hold was that of Tom King's, who was a Sydney gold medalist in the 470 sailing division, coached by Viktor Kovalenko. So at the time, I probably didn't totally appreciate it, but I just thought, wow, this is really cool. Like, I wonder how this guy got this thing. And yeah, as the years have gone by, I obviously had the chance to meet and to chat with a number of these guys and hear more about it. And even the legacy that the sport carries forward, those guys continue to be involved. And Michael Blackburn is now the head technical coach of our Australian sailing team, who won a bronze medal at Olympics. But really, he almost should have won gold as well, because the two guys that beat him are known as the two world's best in the sailing field still today. So hugely rich heritage that Australia has, but also just the depth and I think that's the type of character that suits this sport. We're obviously pretty stubborn to keep at it for such a long time, but we've got a great environment, and a support system has been really built up over those years as a flow on from that Sydney Games, which is really cool. And I hope that the Brisbane Games is just going to kind of give that another boost and send it to another level.
I love this notion of the first gold medal you ever got to touch was from the sport that you eventually went on to yourself win a gold medal. If that's the case, I will be a champion in Taekwondo, because I touched Lauren Burns' gold medal after Sydney. So I think that I'm looking forward to being a Taekwondo gold medalist at some point. Better get started at some point, maybe in that sport.
It's never too late. I'll come
never
watch.
Too late. Never. Thank you. I appreciate. We'll be in Brisbane together. It will be our goal to kind of go that way. Did you actually go to any events in Sydney, like in 2000 at all?
Yeah, no, my dad's a hugely competitive person, and I think that's where a lot of my sporting drive has come from. And it was an opportunity that I'm so grateful my parents didn't want us to miss. I've got three younger sisters, but they dragged us all off to Sydney and got to watch. I actually watched the game of grass hockey with the girls, but saw some athletics and watched the marathon, which was phenomenal as well. Just the atmosphere in that event was really, really cool.
Fantastic. Did you have sort of, in seeing that, like, you know, you're sort of not mentioning that the Olympic dream didn't come to a certain point later on, but can you go to an event like an Olympics as somebody who's young and kind of very impressionable and get taken up in that? And did anything cross your mind of like, hey, I'd like to do this one day, whether it not be in a different sport if you were very sort of athletic as a kid outside of sailing?
No, amazingly, like I hear so many people talk about, this Olympic dream that they'd had that had been kind of fostered from a young age, but it was never really something that had crossed my mind. And I was, prior to joining, probably 1 year out from joining my first Olympic campaign, I was quite adamant in telling people to say, oh, no, I actually got no interest in the Olympics. So don't really know what those guys are on about. But I think I just, I saw my pathway in our sport of sailing is more in the big boat world and in a team environment, probably from my football experience of a big team of 12, 15 people. And that was the environment I always enjoyed, was in a group of people. I thought I was a good personality to help get the best out of them. And it's probably a skill set I've always focused on since and tried to kind of carry forwards. And it took quite some time before I really could appreciate what the Olympics was about. But it just honestly just started as a road trip with mates and trying to get out of some university exams.
Hey, that's what we all try to do in life, right? Basically, when it comes to doing that. When you sort of get that conversation and it's like, hey, you know, how much do you weigh? Come do the 470. I mean, had you done 470 class at that point, or was that kind of the first chance that once you sort of, I guess, been headhunted to do it, you get in a boat and that was your real first chance or a taste of the 470?
No, honestly, had no idea. I probably couldn't have even recognized the boat in the boat park the first day. I was very much into the skiffs, which is like a faster kind of style boat, and to yachts, and that was kind of where my group of friends were. And I was at college, and obviously there's a social side to the sport, which we always enjoyed as well. So that was very much my focus. And yeah, to come into that environment, to see this boat, which is really small, in all honesty, it's 4.7 meters long, as the name kind of gives away, but it's a design that was from the 1950s. It's a French design. It's not a one design, it's a box rule. And the difference between that in sailing is basically if a design is one design, it almost means you can go to the local Bunnings and buy the pieces, the sailing version of Bunnings, that is, to buy the pieces for that boat, because it's one for everyone, a one size fits all. And you kind of buy it, you plug it on, and off you go. Whereas the 470 is a boat that's evolved over many, many years, but it's a box rule, which means there's tolerances in each kind of area. And while everything's kind of narrowed down over the years, it's a design which you can manufacture your own mast, you can manufacture your own sails, the hull shapes, the centerboard and rudders that you use, all the systems on board. And it's certainly something I had no concept of at the time, but over the years, that's where the appeal of the class has drawn me in. And I think that's probably the same for the people before. And yeah, I think that's probably why I managed to stick around at it so long, despite not really fitting in it all that well that very first time I saw one.
So it's very customizable. Is that how you would kind of say it? Is that sort of what, and is that all the way through competition, or even at the Olympics, like sort of you can sort of suit it to yourself and like what you and Matt kind of like when it comes to being out there on the water?
Yeah, sure. If it was customizable, I'd probably put a little bit more headroom in it for me. But no, that's exactly it. And that's a large portion of what the journey is. Victor was certainly the mastermind behind a lot of our campaign, but a huge dimension of it was to prepare the boat, to learn the boat and your ability to make the boat go fast. A large portion of it was about testing equipment to optimize it to your capabilities and your body size. Then you had to get good at racing the boat. And then there was this final level of kind of psychology that layered through all of it that you had to put into place when it got to those big pressure events. So for Matt and I, we're probably at a heavier end of the scale, and a lot of that kind of focus turned towards, okay, how can we make up for Will being a fatty on the wire, send him for a few runs and change the shape of the sails. And it was a big evolution over those years. Each venue you go to has its own subtleties as well. So the preparation towards a Rio Olympics was very different to the Japan ones, not just because of COVID. So the focus was always going to be on different things. And for us with the boat preparation, it's a huge component of it. And not only that, because it's so customized, you don't get to always use your number one or your favorite piece of equipment at every event you do. You're looking at 10 to 14 events per year. That's like at a world stage kind of level, plus days of training all over the place, and the logistics just prohibit the ability to use the same stuff as well as the loading on the equipment. It just wouldn't survive the duration of hours that we do of training in that 4-year cycle. So yeah, certainly plenty to go into it. It's a degree in logistics that kind of comes as a secondary option with doing an Olympic campaign, and you learn a lot about carnets and ships and where they go around the world and what can and can't go on an airplane. And yeah,
you learn
fun
very well about
good stories, no doubt. Yeah,
the freight capabilities of certain airlines and things like that. I'm sure you pretty much get to know, like Qantas versus United or something like that pretty quickly.
Exactly, but it is possible to turn up to the check-in counter with a 470 wrapped in bubble wrap, and they will check it.
Really? Wow! Like just like, hey, what's in your bag?
Paying for it.
Just a boat, basically. It's going in the plane. Wow, yeah. Jesus, did not know that.
Hand luggage. Yeah.
Hand luggage. Put it in the overhead compartment. So that needs to go underneath your seat, actually. That won't fit up there. But at least you know if the plane crashes, you've got your own personal lifeboat. You don't need to go on one of those other ones that they've got. So you just like, you suckers can go on that one. We've got our Olympic boat to be in. Thank you very much.
I've worn my own PFD or life jacket onto plenty of planes when it wouldn't fit in my bag. It's always the line you give to the hostesses looking at you in amazement while you're wearing a life jacket.
Yeah, maybe the other passengers slightly get scared. Like, does he know something that we don't? Like going in there with that? Which it's fascinating to just hear the technicalities of that, because again, like dumb old podcast host sitting there watching the Olympics going like, all those boats are the bloody same. That one's just got 2 people on it. That's got 1 person on it. Everything else is the same. But obviously it's not quite that simple. And I mean, sort of reflecting on that first conversation you got to where you have with all this success, I mean, would you have done anything differently? I mean, it's a simple question to ask given you've come away with a couple of Olympic medals and a few world championships. But I mean, in hindsight, maybe was this a category that you wish you had tried earlier because it's something that you do enjoy so much?
Yeah, I think I'm not a person that lives with regret, but there's definitely things I would have changed through that Olympic journey. And a large portion of the motivation towards Tokyo was to change some of those things that we didn't get right in the Rio quad. And that was a pretty immensely difficult moment or situation to move on from, to be honest, because we went into Rio being world number one, to absolute favourites to win it, and we just didn't perform as well as we knew we could. And that was, even now, it's super hard to accept. And I hate to say it, but like I probably always look on that event as being a disappointment. I learned to accept it in those years after it, and be proud of it, and the opportunity I had to represent and to come home with it when so many people don't get that little piece of metal. So I was hugely fortunate from that, but that was what was so satisfying eventually from that Tokyo experience, is when we went into the very first day of racing. For sure, you're nervous and all the rest of it, but there was no one else I'd rather be sitting next to in the boat, or no other coach. And even that was the same people as I'd been in the last Olympics. I felt like a totally new and different person. And I came away from that first day of racing in Japan just saying, like, no matter what happens now in this event, like I'm proud of what we did today, and that's good enough. Obviously I still want to win, but it was an amazing feeling that time around, versus totally different to what I'd had in that Rio campaign.
You really wanted that large coffee. You were like, fuck, that medium coffee was good, but I can imagine a large coffee is even better.
I just wanted to eat. I wanted coffee as well, but I wanted to eat.
I want my croissant with it. I want everything that you get with that. I mean, the story with you and sort of Matt, in terms of, I believe you sort of partnered up with him, and within a year you were world champions. So not a bad way to start. But I mean, how did that pairing come about? Because obviously he had won gold with Malcolm in London, so I guess it's pretty all right to be able to go, hey, by the way, you're about to partner up with this guy, just won an Olympic gold medal. So I mean, how did that all come about? And kind of, was there just something about you two that worked so quickly that you were able to find success straight away?
Yeah, I think behind the scenes, the credit has to go to Victor again. He was probably the one that, when he saw me in that driveway that first time, he was like, oh, that could be good, not today, but for in the future. He's kind of one of his little pawns in the big picture that he's moving forward to a couple of places. And I was lucky enough actually to come in as a training partner to Matt and to Malcolm in that London Olympiad. So I got to learn the ropes literally in the 470 with a guy called Sam Kibble. And we kind of were just great friends through that campaign, and it was a great opportunity for us to learn from the world's best, and we continued to improve ourselves. And not only did that, but we had a great time, and that was a really important part of that journey, I think, to kind of experience it all and learn all the tough lessons in that environment. And for me, I was fortunate probably to get a bit of a taste of what could come in 2010. Malcolm couldn't do an event, and Matt asked me to jump in to fill in for him, and we went out and actually won this event. And
wow.
It was the first event that Matt had won in that Olympic cycle, and it wasn't with the guy he planned to do his campaign with. So I'm sure there were, well, we never got told, but maybe there were a few questions asked of what they were thinking. But no, I think for them, it gave them probably the confidence that they're on the right path, because you could see the depth that was working in that class, and to know that they also had a good training partner. And that's really important in an Olympic campaign like sailing, where you can use a degree of science to test and validate a lot of the stuff, but the preparation large, it's about having a good trial horse to go against. And Sam and I did that duty, and for sure it had some tough moments with it. It's pretty brutal to go out as a boxing bag every day and kind of almost have the expectation to come second, and not be allowed to go in normally until you did come second.
Wow.
But Matt and Mal were hugely supportive to us and really helped us get through that journey, because there's a lot of financial sacrifice that goes into it, and they helped lessen that burden for us and gave us that platform. And Sam and I both still sail now, and I think it was because of them, because a lot of other people that go into Olympic campaigns don't necessarily come out with a passion for the sport still. But no, we were lucky. And then to come back to your question around that London campaign, I guess the writing was kind of on the wall that Malcolm would probably retire, but it wasn't a certainty. But for me, I knew I just wanted to be involved until the very end, because it was a great opportunity with the top coach and a top team for me to learn more about myself and to be in Europe and enjoy that lifestyle as well, which is a privilege. And for me to jump into the boat with Matt, I think, 3 months after the Olympics, to get our first event win. It was a small domestic event in Australia, but it was just kind of a confirmation that the investment I'd made over the years was on the right pathway and was only going to go from there. And to jump in that situation was a dream come true, but it also did come with a huge amount of pressure. And I think I carried that pressure on my shoulders through that whole 4-year campaign. Kind of always joked that I had big shoes to fill, but had bigger feet, but I had to kind of do it my own way. And I think I did a good job to go about and do that. But I think the pressure was really just me on myself, just saying, well, I know these guys are really good and they won before. So I'm expecting as much of myself to try and match it, if not better it. So yeah, it took me a little bit longer than those guys, but I'm glad I got there in the end.
Well, it's kind of like that sort of weird continuity that seems to come with the 470 class, because you have Malcolm winning gold in Beijing with Nathan, then Malcolm joins Matt, they win gold in London, and then ultimately you do then go on to win gold with Matt in Tokyo. So does that mean then that your new partner come Paris, it's just a continuity, that just whoever's in one half of the boat will eventually join someone else, and you kind of pass on the baton basically. So it's just going to be this long running Australian tradition of, well, I've got the gold, now you get the gold, and you pass it on to your next partner.
Well, Matt's wife's actually a really good 470 sailor, so I was like, oh, maybe I'm supposed to sail with her. I don't really know what the logical progression is, but again, that's a full credit to the team and to Victor. I think since that Sydney Games, or even just prior, they really did a great job to kind of build what the future is going to be, and there's stepping stones there. And it's really unfortunate probably for Matt and myself that our Olympic class has actually now been changed. It's no longer going to exist as the men's 2-person dinghy. It's going to be a mixed class, which kind of gives one of us the opportunity to maybe consider pursuing. But it's a question, like, we're still both very keen, but we haven't quite found the right pathway to go forwards, and it'd be sad to do it without the other one, that's for sure.
Which, just on that topic, because there was obviously something I was going to raise, but I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Because we've had a lot of discussions around how the sports works, and obviously there's only a certain amount of medals you can give out, so, and they obviously want to do a lot more sort of gender inclusive to make it sort of very much 50-50, but it seems odd that we've lived in this world where you've had both men's and women's, and now it's kind of like, oh, bugger it, let's just combine them instead. Like, and also, is sailing really a sport where you need to have a men's and a women's? Like, it seems like a sport where you can easily have mixed competition without it really affecting the overall result.
Yeah, I probably agree with that last one, just saying, like, it's a sport where there are some positions on various designed boats which are more physical, and you might think that a guy might do a better job than a girl, but I think time and time again that's been proven wrong in the sport. And I think it's maybe not entirely the right direction, that it's probably a politically enforced kind of view that the sport's gone the direction it has to equalize the medal count. I think it's fantastic that they encourage more diversity and equality and new pathways into the sport. But I don't think the balance of Olympic divisions really represents what the common day sailor is these days, and also not necessarily the body shape either, which, I think everyone's always going to have their little gripe about it based on how tall or how skinny they are. The 470 for me was a great class because it challenged me physically to sail that boat well, and mentally to help choose the right equipment, and the racing was certainly what I enjoyed. But it's not a kind boat on the body. And for me, as I touched on before, like, I was dieting for the best part of 12 years in that particular boat, and I would have been much happier a couple of kilograms heavier if the boat design had allowed. And I think that's probably a bit of a missed opportunity that hopefully they can rectify over the coming years. But no, it's at the same time, I think they're doing their best to find boats that are accessible for people around the world in all different places. And I definitely value that part of the Olympic atmosphere, which is great. But I think we'll see how this next Olympics goes. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see a few changes for the one beyond.
Because you're going to be in Marseille as well, isn't it? It's not actually in Paris. So, I mean, you're in France, but you're just kind of in a different part of the country.
Correct. The coffee's not better though; it's worse. But it is a very pretty spot in Marseille. So no, fantastic that it's in Europe. I think it's going to be a phenomenal Olympics, no doubt. And hopefully, again, it can be that kind of celebration at the end of some tough times around the world, as they did such a good job of in Japan. And then beyond that, to LA and Brisbane. So it's nice to know that pathway well in advance. And I think there's some fantastic venues.
And it's also the thing that I think we keep forgetting, because we've been very lucky as Olympic fans to have a summer and a winter Olympics within the vicinity of 6 to 8 months. We're just coming off the back of the winters. Is that now we're realistically only 2 years away, aren't we, from Paris? Like, I mean, it's kind of that weird thing where it's like, well, we just had Tokyo. We should be 3-4 years away still. But no, it's 2 years away, which I think we're forgetting. Which, I mean, does that, again, we're not to sort of jump to the end of the interview in terms of questions, but where you're thinking and thought process right now of going towards another Olympics? Does it make it harder given that it's so quickly, or does it make it easier because you know where you want to be in 2 years?
Yeah, no, you're totally correct. It's coming up quick, and I think it's a tough one because, as I touched on before, like for my division in the past, if Matt and I had the chance to go again, we'd probably be like, well, we'd have a bit of time off here and do some other things in our life besides just stay with each other. And come back and I'll see you in 2023. We'll have another crack kind of thing. But no, for us with that shorter time frame, it really puts the pressure on to learn a new division and to try to upskill yourself towards the different aspects of the other class, and also to find a partnership. That's probably one of the key parts that you touched on before, that Australia's had that continuity of people through the years, and it's the partnership, the style of communication, the relationship with the coach, knowing what you need and when you need to do it and how to do it. They're all the kind of the key components to getting a good result, and having that chance to keep testing yourself repetitively so that you know that when that big 1 week of your life comes, that you can put down that performance that you want to do. So for myself, it's pretty tough to know that the days are ticking past, because I know the work that's involved to get to the top. But at the same time, I'm probably getting more excited by the prospect of a nice challenge and trying to work hard towards that goal.
I want to find out more. I always love learning about individual Olympic experiences that shortly, but I'd love to learn just briefly a little bit more when it comes to the physical side, the training, things like that when it comes to the 470. Because again, I'm sitting here watching sailing going, you're having a lovely sunny afternoon on a boat. Like, what do you need to go to a gym for? But it's obviously a very physical sport. You need to be in the gym to get to that level. You're talking about things like diet and weight and everything along those lines. So what sort of things when you and Matt are hitting the gym are you focusing on, and kind of how often are you in the gym versus out on the water to be ready for the physicalities of the boat?
I was going to have a little dig at Matt and say that I never saw him in the gym, but I did see him once or twice.
Once or twice, that counts. Yeah.
Once or twice, yeah. There's a coffee machine there. No, I think I'm not sure how many people cross paths, but our sailing actually became a bit of a TikTok meme at one stage because of this movement that we do on the boat, which is like a fanning of the sail. Anyone familiar with windsurfing would see it too. You move the trailing edge of the sail backwards and forwards in a pumping motion, and it kind of helps propel the boat forwards. And the rules of our particular boat said that above a certain wind range, we're allowed to use kinetics of your body to create these movements. And the style of that sailing evolved dramatically over the last 6 to 8 years and became increasingly physical. And particularly in Tokyo, that kind of added another element to it, because the air density is quite low there, being a hot air venue, so that wind limit would be reached earlier in theory relative to the wind density. So suddenly it doesn't feel that windy, but you're allowed to do this movement. So it's even more important that you do it. It's brutally hot and hugely humid, and the water's like a bath. And we kind of push ourselves to like the high 180s, 190s kind of heart rate zones in those races to get yourself through a 1 hour race. And that's both upwind and downwind, so around the racetrack. So, a huge element of stamina and endurance that kind of had to be built on top of that strength component, which we kind of tried to refine over the years. And I touched on before about the kind of the fighting weight you have in those boats. For the 470, it's usually around 70 kilograms was probably the target weight for a crew, which is my position. And the skipper will be in the 60 to 64 kilogram kind of range. So the pumping element kind of allowed me to be a touch heavier, but for me, I think my sitting weight would be higher up around the 80s. So it's always a constant challenge. And for Matt, likewise, he kind of knew how hard I was pushing to lose that weight. And he knew that any extra weight that he could lose could give me the extra weight that I could gain to have more power to make the boat faster. And it was combined effort. I'd like to say that I lost more weight than he did, because he'll be sore about that. But no, the sailing used to be a game of who was kind of a big guy, and the shape of speed was round. So the guys that had lots of beers and had a big belly, they were usually the ones with the most riding moment on the side of the boat, and they did well in the races. But no, the sport's kind of, if it's not neo-pro, it's getting closer to pro, and people are putting in the hard yards. And I think actually that's probably what I've seen most in the women's divisions in these last years, that step up that a number of those athletes have taken to push themselves and to get that advantage is really impressive to watch.
That's crazy to think that, like, if Matt has an extra cheeseburger one day, that it's going to punish you, and you need to then go on the treadmill for an extra hour. So I was like, mate, what the fuck did you just eat that extra cheeseburger for? Screw you, I'm going to have to work harder tomorrow. Like, I can't think of another sport where it's so almost reliant on each other's, like, diets and everything, and it kind of literally balances each other out. That's incredible.
Whenever we went to dinner, the coach would always volunteer himself to share a meal with myself, which I'm still upset about now, because I don't know why he never just shared with Matt.
Wow. And I mean, you mentioned the positions there. So what defines your positions, and how do you work out who does what on the boat?
Yeah, so to give a bit more background to our sport of sailing, I guess for me, I'm known as a crew, and I actually stand on the side of our boat on a trapeze, and I guess I provide most of the power and the riding moment to the boat, as well as a lot of like tactical overview to give good feedback and communication back to Matt. And Matt's essentially the driver of the boat. He's got a tiller in his hand to steer the boat around, and a lot of little ropes. And I guess I kind of refer to him as the jockey of the boat. He's kind of riding in the boat with a lot of the small fine-tuned controls at his hands and fingertips. And the boat's quite a sensitive boat in our one, that we can change all these equipment, as we spoke about before, and he was certainly the master of that. And between the two of us, you try to project firstly where you think the wind's going to shift to. You obviously can't see the wind, so it's mostly guesswork. Don't tell anybody. Then you want to kind of optimize that wind routing a bit like snakes and ladders, and try to find all the ladders to get yourself around the course in the shortest period of time. Then on top of that, you have all the other competitors in the race. And at the Olympics, it's 23 boats. But some of the World Championships, you go through the 130 competitors that you kind of have to face up against through that progression towards the finals. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's different tactics and different environments, and you kind of sometimes know who your closest competitor would be, and you're keeping an eye on them from the beginning. But the series at the Olympics is 10 races. You're allowed to discard one bad race from that score. And for the top 10 that at the end of that, they go into a medal race, and that's a double points, non-discardable final event. That one, it's a shorter course race, so most of the standard races are around an hour, and they target this final medal race around a 20 to 25 minutes to make it more intense and essentially better for viewing. But on top of that, it just leaves the final event kind of a bit more open-ended of who might win, and puts a lot of pressure on that final day, which is always a bit of fun.
Which, I mean, for you guys in Tokyo, it didn't really matter. You just had to finish right, but you went out and kicked ass anyway. So it was like, you ensured that you got it. But the thing that I love hearing all of that being explained, because I sit here going, wow, this sport sounds amazing. But as you just said, the last race you did, like, let's be honest, when you're watching this, it's not a great sport for spectators. So like, I want all of this stuff that you're saying to like somehow come out so we can watch it, because that sounds like an epic sport, yet it's not. So like, how do we make what you're saying come into us watching it as a spectator so we can be like, holy fuck, this is the best sport in the world?
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. Like, it's got all the elements. We're literally fighting an invisible fight, because you're looking for this wind which you can't see. There's potholes and waves all over the course, and it's constantly changing. You don't necessarily know like how far your race will be. They kind of can decide it in the moments, or they can change the length of the course like mid race. So you could be kind of doing a sprint, or it could be a bit of a marathon. So
mid race.
Yeah, so you're always guessing, and it's not quite
Wow.
orienteering, but sometimes in some big waves, it's just a struggle to find where you're supposed to be going. So,
I want them
and
to
then
do
layered
that in
on top
like,
of all of that,
Usain Bolt halfway through the 100 meters. No, mate, you've got to take a zigzag to your left and it's now 102 meters. Like, come on. Like, what other sports do that?
exactly, and then on top of like it's another layer of the tactics to go with the other racing in that race itself. The overall strategy of a 10 race series, and the wind's kind of different in each day. So you might have strengths or weaknesses or the opponents might have strengths and weaknesses that you need to kind of capitalize on in different days. And then, yeah, on top of that, you kind of step into this medal race arena at the end to kind of have another whirl and throw the dice and hope it goes your way.
Wow. I'm saying this right now. All right. I'm sorry, Emma McKee and Ariane Titmus. You're all great athletes. You're fantastic. But you literally know how long you're swimming, what you're doing, and how long it's going to take you. All right. Come Paris, change it up. Like, just change it up. Make them swim extra more. Halfway through, no, you can't swing backstroke, Kaylee. You've got to start swinging breaststroke to really confuse the fuck out of it. Like, I mean, that's like kind of what you're saying right there. Like, it's just
I think it is because
that.
then you got to try and prove you're better than your competitors. And that's ultimately what it comes down to. For us, that the biggest challenge of that COVID period was that we had no one to compare where we're against. There's no stopwatch to see how quick we're going against someone else or top speed. It's more about you got to get there and be the best on that day against the people you're against. So yeah, it's a tough sport to put all your eggs into one basket to follow towards. But
yeah, for sure. All we did during Tokyo when we did our commentary of sailing to make it more exciting, we added Pirates of the Caribbean music to it, and we thought that worked out okay. But I mean, God,
that's my favorite when you guys do that.
It made it to a point where we thought, well, this is going to get the kids involved. But seriously, the kids need to listen to this interview, and that will get them involved enough as it is. I think like this, we needed you on that commentary. We needed you live commentating what you guys were doing out there.
And there's normally free lollies at the sailing clubs as well. So it's not a good
there you
incentive
go.
to get into it.
Free lollies, medium coffees and free lollies. The Will Ryan autobiography. I like that. It's interesting. When you mentioned earlier in the interview about the psychological aspect, I always love learning about the psychological aspect of different sports. But what is done in a sailor's mind? Like, what are you and Matt working on when it comes to that mental aspect of the sport?
Yes. So Victor, again, I've got to give him the credit because he was probably the one that raised my awareness to it even existing really within the sport of sailing. I thought it was just a bit of go out there and have a bit of a go at it and see what happens. And that's the end of it at the end of the day. But he probably developed something that's always been in my lifestyle, but really highlighted. And so Matt and I were just competitors on and off the water. And that's kind of what drives you to be the best and to put your whole life on hold. He used to say to us, so how many engineers are there in the world? Because this is what I wanted to study, engineering. And I'd give him some kind of rhetorical answer and he'd say, okay, there's only one gold medal and glory lives forever. So I was like, okay.
Wow, deep.
I guess that means I shouldn't go to uni tomorrow. You want me to come train? Like he had a quote that was trust yourself and follow your dreams. And it's something that I'd never probably super well related to through my journey. I was probably more closer to the samurai, like do or do not, there is no try. I was all in or nothing and kind of Top Gun was my favorite movie. So I very much resound with that you're all into something. But yeah, we're going to a sailing event because of that nature of the 10 races, not being able to control the conditions, not being able to influence the on-water umpires who may or may not know the intricacies of your division of boat as well as they know others. So there's always a bit of ambiguity factored in there. There's the tactics of different individuals on a day. One boat could try to take you out versus the rest of the fleet. And all of those kind of like roll into this big package that you need to always focus on myself and focus on my own performance first. And I wouldn't normally come to an end of a racing day and be checking the results. I would be able to reflect on it and know, did I perform well or did I not perform well on this particular day? And I could know where the results would be based on my own perception of how I'd done. And I think that's something that I tried to carry through no matter the level of the competition. If it was a small one or a big one, is keep those processes the same. Ultimately, trust yourself, like Victor had always said. Finally listen to him at the end, and to know that when you're in a position where you know you're not deserving of, that you know that you can be better than this, that you have to dig in and and use that confidence inside yourself to produce the speed in the boat to make the good decision under pressure. And Matt was coached by Victor for over 22 years, I think. So there's always a lot of his Victorisms within Matt, and I've been coached by, so with the two of them, and coached by Victor for close on 10 years. And I think the synergy that we kind of drew on together, but not only that, we expanded to all of the relationships with all the people around us who support us, the sailmakers, the boat builders, the Triple SM support team on the ground there in the games, and even the family and friends, to kind of use the energy and all the things that people had taught you along the way to combine it into one. And I know it's a long-winded answer to a psychology question, but I think ultimately that's what it came down to. And there's plenty of tough moments along the way. You're no shortage of motivation. And sometimes it's anger that fires you up in some moments. Sometimes it's something else. But yeah, you just got to put it into one and know how to channel your energy as best you can in those tough moments.
I like the word Victorisms. That's something he can maybe release a book on. Does it also come down to... I guess, chemistry between you and Matt? Like, you know, do you hang out afterwards, in between events, to kind of work on that chemistry? Because I can imagine you need some level of chemistry, and you don't want to fucking hate each other in the middle of a sailing event. Like, shut up, Matt, get in the water. Like, you need to work together well on that boat in order to be successful. So do you just go out and grab a drink and grab a medium coffee or something like that to kind of work on that friendship, I guess, outside of the boat?
Yeah, I think we all know how hard it is to just in normal day relationships with boyfriend to girlfriend or dealing with your parents. So to kind of be thrown into a really small boat by some old Ukrainian guy who met in the driveway. It's kind of crazy
that it like that. Get in the boat.
It probably didn't seem destined to work, but yeah. So for Matt and I, we're actually probably quite similar in a lot of our ways. We've similar interest in business and our studies, and kind of both love different sports and endurance, more endurance style athletes rather than strength style athletes, and a lot of features like this. But what we probably did really well through our early years of that campaign was to separate the business relationship part of our campaign versus the friendship. And that comes with some sacrifices. We consciously chose to stay together as little as possible between my coach, Matt, and myself. And you try to have that little bit of separation. But I think ultimately that was what gave us a really good foundation that we could then critically analyze everything without necessarily going into the emotions that might have come with it otherwise, of being a friend and having to work out how to delicately say something to someone. And that's something that I've experienced in other sailing through my life. So it's something that's really I'm very appreciative of now. But we handled that well, and that helped us get through a lot of the early years of that campaign. But probably what COVID did for us at the very end was actually to invert that and put us so full on together due to the natures of what COVID did for everybody, that we were kind of forced to take the relationship to another level. And I think Matt and I are the better friends going into the Olympics than we'd ever been. We still had that professional relationship underneath that. And without being mean to the coach, I think Matt and I were a better team together then than what we'd been as part of that triangular kind of formation that happened when you have extra people in it. For Matt and I, we were more in sync. We had the ability to communicate better than what we'd ever done before. And we'd probably been pushed into that by the coach. It's probably another one of his crazy ideas that kind of came to fruition at the right time. But no, we were really fortunate in the end that, yeah, I think we'll be hopefully be friends for a little while longer. Probably we won't sail together anymore. So that probably helps.
Probably does a little bit. Not bad to be friends with Australia's most successful Olympic sailor of all time as well. So, you know.
Yeah, I know. He can always hold that one over me, can't he? So.
Well, you've got time, you know. Like if he doesn't, go on, you could win. You just need one more gold and you'll join him, and then go on to LA and you can beat his record. So just saying, it's still available.
I've pretty much beat him over the line in every race, I reckon. So really, I think the media's got it wrong. I'll have to update
exactly.
them.
They did. Yeah, exactly. Stupid media. What can we say about that? I always love to, again, Olympic experiences outside of the competition side of things. So you sort of said about how, the Olympics wasn't necessarily something you grew up as a kid, like this is what I wanted to do. But when you went, particularly say Rio, your first Olympics, do you soak up things like getting your uniform for the first time, if you do any of the ceremonies, being in the village, things like that? Or does it take a second Olympics for you to maybe go, okay, well, I'm going to take this on board a little bit more this time around because it maybe was something that I didn't, soak up as much the first time around?
It's an excellent question. Honestly, I haven't thought about it enough to really sink in. I'm not old enough yet. It'll be when I'm in my armchair telling grandkids about how I was awesome back in the day. Hopefully, I don't know. But I think the first one, I was just in a bit of awe, and like I said before, like I had a lot of pressure on myself that it wasn't over until that Olympic medal had been won, or gold medal had been won. So for the Rio campaign, I probably didn't indulge myself as much as I should have in hindsight. And that was something that I regretted quite a lot, like to not go to the opening ceremony because of the potential distraction, to kind of miss out on a lot of those experiences kind of coming into it. I really wanted to do another Olympics to have that chance. And as it panned out, Tokyo wasn't to be that Olympics because we missed out on pretty much everything. So that one definitely a lot of it got swept under the rug. We were fortunate enough, Matt, myself, and another sailor, Matt, were the first Australian athletes to be announced to the Australian Olympic team for Tokyo, which was in September 2019.
Wow.
And I just happened to be away overseas, so I missed that as well. So and no roadshow after party back in Australia either. So
you haven't been back to Australia, so I mean you don't know all these things that are waiting for you, Will. I'm telling you.
Yeah, exactly. That big contract deal and that large cappuccino. So I look forward to it when I get back there. But no, I think I was really lucky actually with the Tokyo experience that Matt got and asked to be the flag bearer for the Olympics at the closing ceremony. And he was kind enough to put his foot down and asked, could I come with him? And that was amazing. And I think kind of sealed that end of that Olympic campaign really nicely for the two of us together. We did finally get to go to do some of those experiences. We saw the Boomers win their bronze medal and have a beer with Paddy Mills and all the team after that race and be part of the closing ceremony when a lot of people didn't get that opportunity. So hugely grateful for that. And I'm an absolute Olympic sports fanatic now, and I'm sure that won't ever change. But a large portion of me really, really hopes that I might get the chance to go to another Olympic Games again.
Pretty special to be able to have a beer with Paddy Mills. Winning an Olympic gold medal and doing that, that's kind of an okay experience to have that going on.
Not bad at all, yeah.
Which I find it so fascinating to think, like, obviously you get named to the team that early. I mean, realistically, not that early, because in a normal time, you'd be, 8 months out from an Olympics. It turns out to basically be, 20 months, where we've had so many of our winter athletes on who often don't get named until, 2 weeks before the Olympics. So, it's that huge discrepancy on certain sports, particularly on the summer versus the winter side of things, where you're going, well, I know I'm going to the Olympics, there better be an Olympics, versus, shit, a week to go, am I going to be on the team or not?
Yeah, I think it's another subset of our sport. It's very much an experience sport, not necessarily a form sport. There's an element of form, but some teams, like what we had experienced in Rio, they can kind of come out and perform a fantastic week of racing. Maybe not quite what they've been doing before, but that particular conditions, that style of risk factors that go into the event. Maybe they're underdog without the pressure on their shoulders, and they're hyped up by the Olympics to run them out, and they can go out and really produce that amazing performance. And you so often see that in other sports where someone runs the sub 10-second PB of their life in the finals. And the same thing happens in sailing. So I think for us, it's a bit of a different game that we need the time to learn the weather patterns of a venue to get our equipment and logistics. It's not about just grabbing your speedos or set of goggles that they probably already sent to the venue for you, actually, if you're in the swim team. But for us, it's about packing up these containers. I think the team has something like 11 40-foot shipping containers full of stuff that we utilized between, I think, the 11 athletes in Tokyo. Insane. So there's a big support team behind the scenes that go with it, and it's a full traveling roadshow. So you do need that time to get your bags packed before you go there.
Yeah, no, I can definitely imagine. You touched a little bit on Rio, obviously disappointing to not get the gold. You get the silver. Was there any part of you, even though you were obviously disappointed not to win the gold, was there any part of you that was just like, I've got an Olympic medal? I mean, this still means something, or was it so much like, nah, not gold, don't give a shit, bring on Tokyo?
In the moment, honestly, when it came back to the beach, I was like distraught. I think it'd been a really tough games, like just a long journey with a lot of pressure kind of leading into it. But physically, I'd pushed myself beyond the breaking limit in hindsight of how low I could drop my body weight for that event. 3 weeks prior, we'd expected to be a lighter event, and 3 weeks prior, we'd been a rocket ship in these light winds. I was the first one on trapeze, even out on trapeze before a lot of the girls who have a pretty much the same boat as us. So I was definitely light. And then the games turned into this absolute marathon. A huge storm front came through. We had a number of issues with equipment. And all of the lay days got used up as racing days through the event. And that's so 4 extra days we were out there, long days in the water in the sun. And by the end of that week, not only was I just physically and mentally done, but my dad was standing on the beach and I walked up to him after the race and he kind of knew, obviously, that I'd wanted gold more than anything. And I think I probably felt disappointment that I couldn't come to him with a gold medal. And that was probably like the hardest moment of that games. And I honestly don't remember much of standing on the dais and all of that aftermath of that Olympics. It wasn't probably till I'd had a couple of burgers and got back to Australia and eaten something that I started to click back into gear. So must have been that medium coffee. But for the I guess the later portion of that one, once I did that welcome home tour in Australia and kind of could enjoy the success of the other athletes around me and have that chance to talk to them and hear about their stories and the troubles that they'd gone through and their experience, I think that made me relate and understand how fortunate I was to have this paperweight. And yeah, gave it back to mum and I kind of know it's there if I ever want to go and look at it. It's not something that I pull out of the drawer to channel for motivation. I've got that deep inside me, but no, I know one day I'll definitely be even more proud probably than what I am today.
Which with the motivation, at least, I can imagine that come Tokyo, knowing the disappointment that you had in Rio, does that spur you guys on just slightly bit? So when I mentioned before about how you came into that last race, you just had to finish it and you won the goal, but you still go out there and win the damn thing. Like, is it just things like the internal disappointment that probably still stuck with you since Rio that you're like, no, we are making sure we are getting this gold and we are doing it in style?
Yeah, 100%. I think I had more pressure on myself on that race than I did in any other race in that series. And yeah, as you touched on, we basically got an unassailable points gap going to medal race. We literally just had to cross the starting line and ideally finish to secure our gold medal. But Matt and I kind of both knew that this is the last day that we're going to get to sail this boat together, the last day of that Olympic journey for us. And we kind of knew that we'd put all this effort into sailing this way that we thought our style of way. And we're like, this is the day that we've got to put it all together. And so we took a very low risk starting option, which is to start on the opposite tack to everybody behind everyone, a couple of lengths behind the starting line. So we got through that process safely and got over the starting line without any fouls or penalties and anything like that. And from that moment, it's just like, okay, let's enjoy this. And yeah, as I touched on before, we have this pumping rule, and fortunately, it just popped up just minutes before the start line, and no shortage of motivation from me. And suddenly, I wasn't feeling tired or anything like that anymore, and off we went. And it was awesome. We just managed to go behind the fleet and literally sail through the fleet and pop around the top one in second. And some great footage that the TV cameras managed to do to capture our downwind style, which is super dynamic to push these 50 or 60-year-old design boats downwind at the top end of their capabilities, and managed to come around and kind of have this little victory tour for the last lap. And it was just awesome. And it's something I for sure won't ever forget.
Can you even put it into words what it's like to realise that you're an Olympic champion? I mean, as I said at the top of the interview, 5 world championships, which I'm sure are pretty darn special, but I mean, an Olympic gold medal, something I can imagine that never gets topped.
Yeah, they often say that you trade all your world championship wins in for that Olympic medal. And yeah, honestly, I probably agree with that because I don't remember many of the world championship wins now that I think about it. Maybe the parties after them were too big. I can't remember. But
All the large coffees you get for world championships.
I'm not sure I can put into words like other than just say happy. It wasn't a sense of relief because I think we knew we'd done the hard work. We knew we deserved to do well, whether it was to win or not win. I think just all the challenges through COVID just made us so appreciative just to be there and to be racing, to do what it was that we loved doing and we'd worked so hard towards. And to get to do it on the stage, we couldn't have our family and friends there which had been planned and had been so part of it. So we kind of, you go into it that a slightly lesser expectations, perhaps to some extent of the experience, but just as high for the results. And to get away from that one and just to do it with the people that we set out to do it with after all those years, I think, just made me happy.
Do you remember that, Dias? Do you remember the medal with the national anthem? Do you remember all of that?
Yeah, certainly. I think I'd watched plenty of Olympic sports up to that point and understood that it's one like no other with all the COVID protocols that you're kind of standing up there with your masks and these always fantastic looking tracksuits that never really fit properly. And ours was no exception. And I remember thinking it through it before. It's like, if I was ever going to get presented by someone, it's got to be from Matt, and I wanted to be the same to do it for him. So as soon as it came up, I grabbed the first one off the table, and Matt kind of put his head down, and I put my hand out to shake his hand to say well done first. And I think that was just a really special touch that we had between the two of us. It was the same handshake we met each other with every day of our campaign. And it was a nice way to finish it. And it was a super proud moment to see the flag and hear the national anthem, and not many people there, but my little sister was there, and I knew she had all the mobile phones hooked up to our family and friends and girlfriends and all over the world showcasing it. So that was pretty cool.
And it must have been too to be part of history for Australia. Equal best gold medals ever won at an Olympics with 17. You contributed to that count, but just what was it like and the vibe of the Australian team, when you got to go to the closing ceremony and bump into some of the athletes who were still there, obviously? I mean, was there a special kind of vibe around that team in Tokyo given the success?
So we had like a sub-site venue for us where our standing was, because we're about 45 kilometers south of the main part of Tokyo. The team was ecstatic because Matt Wern had also won a gold medal as well as us. But I think a portion of me was almost sad because there were so many other great athletes in our sailing team that we wanted to do well, and they hadn't quite got the result which we felt that they deserved. The defending silver medalists, Jason and Lisa, had a really tough event and didn't quite get the cards to fall their way. Jake Lilly, to name another one, had overcome some huge physical challenges to get just to the games, and he was super close. One of my sisters, Jamie, was there, and I knew that they weren't far off, just a little bit more time in the boat together in that new partnership, and they would have been up there as well. So I think it was almost a bit sad from my side in that team environment once we did get to Tokyo and started to understand, like you said, about the 17 gold medals and being a successful team, and hearing the stories of the volleyballers and the fighters and all the things that these other teams had gone through. I think that's where you really relates back to being part of this bigger, broader Aussie sports team, and hugely proud to be part of it, and awesome to see them get a great result. But I really hope that it's going to be beaten in all the Olympics to come. Well,
I mean, Brisbane, 10 years, it's going to happen there at least if it doesn't happen beforehand in Paris and LA, because we remember Sydney, how great that was. So, no pressure on Brisbane, which, I mean, just on with Jamie, your sister being there, I mean, I can imagine your parents absolutely love that. But like, is that, given the lack of spectators, a lack of family, was it nice to have at least Jamie there that you can share that experience with, and I guess probably feel a bit nervous for her competing, but at least be able to have, one family member there to celebrate your gold medal with?
No, totally. She was the first person to meet me on the ramp when we came in, and it's hard to say, but she probably knew more than anyone else what it meant and how hard that last 18 months had been. When COVID kind of first popped up in March of 2020, we both ended up back in our parents' holiday house trying to avoid passing. We just returned from Europe, so we were COVID risk people. So we were kind of isolated together and kind of what's next kind of moments, looking at each other saying, like, should we be looking for a new career, or do you think this is going to work out? And kind of a lot of the motivation to each other to keep putting in those hard yards during that time to go to the gym and eat well. And I think, to see her at the finish and know that she's quite tech savvy. She was doing a great job just to share with the girlfriends and boyfriends and family around the world was super special, because it meant that I could just enjoy that moment for what it was and didn't feel any pressure to have to grab my phone to call anyone. I knew that she was looking after me once again.
What's it like in terms of, because I mean, we're having a lot of winter athletes on. We've spoken a lot to them recently about how, you know, for the majority of winter athletes, the only time Australia, in terms of like the media and everything, focuses on them is during an Olympics. And I can imagine it's kind of a bit similar for the sailing team. You know, it's not swimming, it's not basketball, it's not sort of something that we're focusing a lot. So how do you find then, you know, Channel 7 constantly wanting to be on you all at that point? And I'm sure you got radio stations and newspapers back in Australia wanting to interview you on that. Like, is that something that you enjoy, or is it kind of something like, fuck the goddamn media here, you know, why aren't you following us all the other years, you know? Like, how do you find all of that kind of stuff that comes with winning a gold medal?
Yeah, I don't have as many Instagram followers as many of the other athletes from the team. And I think it probably reflects back a little bit to why you do it. Not saying the others aren't in it for the same reason, but for me, it's always just been a sport that I associate with enjoyment because of that early age and a passion to improve myself. And it's probably was a great tool which I could have promoted myself better to lead into future opportunities. But I think the media situation at the Olympics is just totally unique for us then in many respects, and something you actually end up enjoying. For sure, the day-to-day when you have to go through the mix zone and you had a bit of a tough day, it's usually the crew, myself, who gets the tough questions when we've had a bad day, and they seem to go to the skipper a lot on the days we've had a good day. So it's a bit of a trend that seems to emerge. But no, you learn to try to control and understand a bit more what has motivated or what has gone well or gone poorly in those different days. And I guess I try to reflect on it as a learning experience into each of the next ones. But for me, ultimately, I'm not afraid of the media. I'm happy to stand out there and try and look pretty, and let Matt answer all the questions. But no, a great opportunity to showcase the sport. And I think that for me, that's something that I've always tried to carry forward, is any chance that I can share my stories or show my medal to someone that might motivate them into a career in sport. I'm always more than happy to do so, because I think I just feel so hugely fortunate with the path that my life has taken, and I hope that some others get to do likewise.
You mentioned where the silver medal is. Where's the gold medal? What have you done with it? Is it something that you just keep carrying around with you, or is it just tucked away safely that you look at, you know, quietly, you know, just before you go to sleep every night?
No, so I'm still based in Europe at the moment. I'm based in Switzerland with my girlfriend over here. So I haven't had the chance to go back to Australia. So I do think that Mum will probably end up with the gold medal, but for now it hasn't touched Australian shores. So it lives in a sock inside a random cupboard, actually, at the moment.
I love hearing when they just live in a sock. It's the Olympic medal's home is the sock. That's all I can say based on these interviews.
I think the sock of this one is actually clean, was clean when I put it on. Whereas the one from the Rio medal, I actually can't guarantee it was a new sock when I put the medal in it. So I think
you didn't care about that one. Things have
improved over the last 5 years. not as much.
The one thing I also love seeing with the medals, which I think, since social media, it's become much more prevalent, and some of the guests on the show too, is like the box you get it in. It's not just obviously, you know, put around your neck, that's it, but you get like a very well presented box. And I know with like the Beijing athletes, they got like a pin, I think, with it too. So I don't know, I'm guessing maybe you got a special pin as well. So like it's all the presentation that comes around, not just a medal, but everything that you get with the medal too.
Yes, certainly. And the Tokyo one was much higher quality. So the Rio ones, I'm not sure if other people have touched on this, but the history of the medals is that usually they're sourced from the medal, the natural resources of that location. So in Rio, they're all silver. All the medals were silver with the various coatings. Unfortunately, they were pretty terrible quality, because a year after I pulled mine, or my mum pulled it out, and mine had rusted and corroded and all
Wow.
tattered, and they offered replacements for those medals. So I think that says a little bit about the whole Rio experience, and it's very fitting because a day out from the Olympic Games in Rio, they're still building the boat ramp to put our boats into the water. So we should have known better. But
The green
Tokyo
diving
ones
pool is
were-
stuck in our head forever from those games. So
exactly,
yeah.
it would never disappear, that one. Whereas no, Tokyo, it was an amazing Olympics. I'm sorry for the people that they couldn't have their normal Olympics, because they're just such a friendly culture. They were always trying to make everyone feel comfortable and to really enjoy the environment there. And I'm so grateful that we actually traveled to Japan so many times in the years before to experience that. For those that just went to the Olympics, I really hope that they will find the opportunity to go back again and enjoy it there. But Tokyo is always top quality everything. I think that's recycled computers and iPhones that they use for the medals this time around. They did a great job to make sure that it was the biggest medal that they've ever produced. And yeah, everything, the little boxes and stuff are a little pretty impressive handmade craftsmanship to go with it.
It's a nice looking medal. We did a ranking the medals episode. No, from memory it came top 10, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So nice, definitely a nice looking medal. Before we get to sort of our closing questions, Will, I mean, we've touched on kind of, potential next Olympics and things like that, but going back to sort of what you're talking about, the type of racing you may be looking at getting to sailing is something like a Sydney to Hobart and America's Cup, something like that in your future. Would that be something you would like to have a go at one day?
Yeah, I've done the Sydney to Hobart. I was the youngest competitor back in 2006, which was a fantastic opportunity. As I've said, my birthday is just a couple of days before Christmas, so potentially I was just a media ploy to get me on the boat, but I took it with both hands and ran with it, and it was a great experience. The America's Cup and like these Sail GP circuit and things that are developing around the world, I'd love to get into, but the unique thing about our sport is just the people you meet, and that could be in any environment on any type of boat. So I certainly just want to kind of keep jumping at any opportunity that comes my way. But probably the one thing that from my Olympic campaign that's kind of carried through it was just my love for all types of endurance sports and any sporting opportunity. And I think, for me, it's just about finding whatever that next Ironman could be or next adventure race to challenge myself might be to keep trying to be better than yesterday, for lack of a better term, but more just for the experience to be a bit of fun and see how I perform.
I've got to ask, given that I am a proud Hobartian, what was your experience like when you landed in my great city? Did you stay there for like the taste, the New Year's, all the kind of fun stuff that's happening around there at that part of the year?
So my first Hobart was pretty brutal. The only time we ever used the front sail, the coloured one, the spinnaker, the downwind sail was just off the start line. So we hit our top speed within the first 4 minutes of the race.
Wow.
Turned right at the heads into a lovely upwind storm, and it was 3 days, 19 hours of upwind sailing all the way to Tasmania. So
wow.
By the time I got there, I was a broken person. And
usually happens when you get to Hobart.
Exactly. Running late for my flight to get to my next event, which, so I know I have to do another Hobart. I've had 2 more times, where one was cancelled due to COVID, another time due to boat breakages, which I didn't end up attending. But I'm sure there'll be another race in the cards to come. But Tassie is a great city. I've been in plenty of times outside of the Hobart time and never regretted it.
Good to know. That's what we like to hear when it comes to that side of things there as well. And any thoughts to get into like maybe some acting for Pirates of the Caribbean now that we brought that up before? I mean, they could probably use you for like a stunt double or something. Johnny Depp, he's looking a bit rough at the moment, so I mean he might need a couple of stunt doubles in the next one.
I heard they were going to pay him something like £17 million for his bit, so. Yeah, I'm happy to probably do it a little bit cheaper than him. So if they're listening, feel free to reach out.
Exactly. Just make sure he doesn't bring any dogs and don't poop in his bed. And I think everything will be probably
my best.
Yeah, it's hard probably. I mean, you just see Johnny Depp, I'm going to poo in your bed, mate. Why not? Kind of go on that way. As I said, we like to close out our chats with some get to know you style questions. As always, these are based on a Team Canada questionnaire they gave their athletes prior to both Rio and Pyeongchang. Now, there is, of course, and we always say this, a drawing element. If you're feeling up to it, Will, and you want to draw, you can do some homework, send it in, and we'll put it up on our social media. We've had a couple of athletes do it in the past, so I don't know if we've had summer athlete do it. I feel it's only been winter athletes who have done it. So just putting some pressure on you there, Will, if you just
They must have
getting a
more
pen
indoor
out.
time, I guess.
Maybe with that one. But there's no right or wrong answer, so you can't fail this. Hopefully. If you do, then you're doing something wrong. But we'll try that. Your favourite all-time Olympic moment is, and you can answer your own gold medal win if you really want to.
This my earliest memory is probably Kieran Perkins in winning from lane 8.
Yep. Perfect. Love that. That's one of my. I do remember bits of Barcelona, but I definitely Atlanta was the first one I really paid attention to, and I remember that one. That's iconic.
That was cool.
Most Australians will remember that one. As a kid, your favourite sports team was?
The Wallabies. I had no option. Dad made me watch every game. I just wanted to be Matt Burke.
Yeah, and is it still? Do you follow them closely still to this day?
Their lack of performance over some years has left me kind of wondering, but I do my best. And whenever I'm with Dad, I obviously watch all the games with him as well.
Is it a case, because obviously I'm from an Australian football state, so therefore, we've got one code that we can focus on. But if you're sort of into Union, you're into the Wallabies and that, do you just don't associate with the NRL, or can you sort of keep an eye on it? Like, is it sort of a bit fractured there where, oh, no, that's NRL. That's not real rugby. I'm not going to watch that.
No, so when we moved to Newcastle, they didn't have a Union team at the time. So Dad did give me permission to go play NRL instead. So I think it's allowed in our household. But any game with a big team running around the field, Dad seems to be a bit of a fan of. But no, as I touched on, I admire the way that some of those big teams can work together and be united in the goal. And I think it's pretty cool.
You could have, if you had followed that path. I mean, you still could have been an Olympian now with rugby sevens, of course, being an Olympic sport. So, I mean, it still could have happened. You never know.
My rugby skills were better than my cricket skills, but I think I'm still fortunate that I found sailing.
There you go. If you could be any superhero, who would you be?
Probably Maverick from Top Gun. He's a superhero, isn't he?
That counts. Are you excited for Top Gun 2?
Always, yep. Always. I've been talking about it for years. It feels like I almost don't think it's really going to happen. Another delay, but fingers crossed.
as a James Bond fan, trust me, I feel that pain. And the amount of times that No Time That I got delayed, it was kind of like, okay, are we ever going to see this film? And eventually we did get to see it. Your favourite music artists are?
That's a tough one because honestly, I kind of love any music, but I have seen Coldplay probably more than any other band live, and their shows are always amazing. So I guess I'll put them at the top of the list.
Can you actually, like, obviously when you're on the boat, I'm sure you're talking, you're doing that, but like, say like last day in Tokyo, when again, you just have to show up basically, but you still do what you do. Could you have just like, I don't know, put a couple of AirPods in or put a speaker on, cracked open the champagne, just like, fuck it, we've got the gold, like crank out the Coldplay. Like, could you have done that?
I think we should have had like a battle hymn for like as you go out, like they do in the America's Cup back in the day when they use Men at Work. I think if we'd had a bit more, organisation from our half, maybe we could have popped out something nice and loud.
Could have worked, yeah. That would have worked. Again, Pirates of the Caribbean. It's all, you're always allowed to use it.
Maybe that was it.
Take it that way. If you could eat one food next time, exactly, Paris. If you could eat one food for the rest of your life, what would it be?
I think I have to say tiramisu.
Ooh, yes.
Always been a favourite, and it was just one of those ones that I had to neglect more times than I wanted through these last years. And it made me feel heinously sick, but I would be more than happy to take that on as long as I could have it every time.
I hope like Matt didn't like start just eating it in front of you. Like, look at this tiramisu wheel that I'm eating. Like, you have to lose more weight while I'm putting it on. It's completely rubbing it in your face. Your favourite place to compete is?
Another tough one. I'd love to say home. My family live on the waters of Lake Macquarie, which I do think is an amazing place. But having said all that, I rarely compete there. So to come across to Europe and to compete in some of these Mediterranean venues, they're probably the special ones to be on the clear blue waters and a bit of sunshine and all the rest of it is pretty special.
I can imagine. The picture element, if you want to draw a picture of yourself, that's the first one. So, you can feel free to... Stick figures are acceptable, we'll say that.
It will be a stick figure. I hope that's
good.
acceptable. I
That's
could do a
completely
boat near it
acceptable.
if you need.
Yeah, well, why not? Well, just to make sure it's you and just not like, some weird little stick figure. What is one thing that you have always wanted to do?
To fly a plane.
Fly a plane. Nice.
Or be able to fly. That's less realistic, probably the second one.
You never know. It could happen one day. Could you take any skills from sailing and put it into piloting a plane?
Certainly, there's a lot of the same elements, and I've been really fortunate to kind of pilot a few small planes alongside other people. But when you watch those fighter jets kind of zooming through the sky, there must be just such a surreal feeling that I think maybe it comes from watching Top Gun 1,000 times too many times. But that's definitely up there as a life experience I'd like to tick off.
I think if there's anything you can get for free with your gold medal, maybe try and get yourself to like the premiere of Top Gun 2, meet up with Tom Cruise. He's a bit of an adrenaline junkie, as we know, and be like, hey, Tom, take me up in an F-18 or something like that, and just, that bucket list galore going on there, right?
I'll try and trade him that large copy that I hope to get when I get back to Australia one day.
I'm sure I don't know if he's been to Australia in a while. I mean, how long has he and Nicole been apart? So, he's probably due to get back to Australia soon, old Tom. So,
probably MI2, wasn't it? Little Garden Island.
You're right. Yeah, that was what, 2000, wasn't it?
Bruce.
20 odd years. So, gosh. Wow, remember that movie? Your favorite, this is obviously asked to a winter athlete, so I'm going to switch this around. The question is my favorite thing to do in the summer. So I'm going to ask you, what's your favorite thing to do in the winter?
Probably just like what all the winter athletes obviously said, sailing. They're summer sport, and for me, I'm going to say skiing. I absolutely love it, and been really fortunate this last couple of months to be over here in Europe, and finally enjoying, allowed to not be worried about injuring myself quite as much as I always feared before.
Perfect. Your favorite well, I think I know your favorite movie. Do I even need to ask you what your favorite movie is?
Tough guess, but you probably get it.
Yeah. Is it something with planes? Maybe, not sure. Possibly. Do you just have like Highway to the Danger Zone always just going over the speaker and take my breath away? Like, is it the soundtrack always pumping as well?
See, that's the entrance song we should have played in Tokyo. I've had a shocker there. Didn't even let it work. Highway to the Danger Zone.
Highway to the Danger Zone.
But you probably know my password to all my things now.
Oh shit! Well, there you go, everyone. So it's Will Ryan at goldmedalist.com. Password being Highway to the Danger Zone. Sweet. Your favorite place to visit in Australia is?
Again, it's home. I've been spoiled to have an amazing life of travel, but you definitely miss to get back home. So back in Coal Point, that's kind of where I really found the sailing and got all my good friends group there and the activities I love to do. But having said that, like, I think every time we fly to Sydney, it's just the most surreal looking city when you fly in from up top, and all the water's there. And I think we get extremely lucky to live in Australia because there's not many bad places to go.
It's well, I don't know if you've been to Launceston, but we won't start that up. It's you're right. Like when it because the way the plane flies into the city, like you've always got that like gorgeous view, don't you? Of just you're really up close to the city. So it is sort of one of the more unique sort of flight paths. When was the last time you were back in Australia? You said you haven't been back since Tokyo, but I mean, how long has it been actually since you've been to Australia?
Yeah, so we had I think 5.5 weeks at home in late May, early June. I spent 2 of those weeks in a lovely hotel quarantine in Sydney. And then about 4 of those days back actually at home before flying out again. So it's been quite some time to really got to relax. But so I think early June, we headed off over to Tokyo.
Wow. And are there plans? Like, are you looking at going back at some point this year, or it's kind of one of these moments where you're like, you don't actually know when you're going to be back?
No, absolutely love to. At the end of last year, the tickets were kind of in that €10,000 price range one way, which was just a little bit more. I couldn't quite trade the coffee for it.
Couldn't quite. Yeah. Gold medal didn't quite get you that type of money.
But no, being Europe based and taking up some new work opportunities that kind of presented themselves over here. and kind of returning the favor to my girlfriend to base with her in her hometown after all her years of traveling alongside me on the road show. She's a sailor as well, so she knows the drill, and it was kind of cool. We could do that journey together, but now it's about seeing what growing up life's a bit more about, and buying your own bed and lounge and all those big decisions you have to make. But no, I'd absolutely love to get back to Australia, and for sure to bring the medal back home, and to see my grandfather for one would be top of the list. But just to share it with all those people that played such a big part in that journey, and certainly a few more beers to be shared with Matt and the rest of the team at some stage in the future too.
I love that you're an adult when you got to buy a bed. That's basically it. No more racing car beds. Shit, can't have them anymore. No bunks anymore. We get a double. Oh, really?
Yeah, I have to share.
Damn it. What? Yeah, I have to share. What's going on there? Your favourite cartoon to watch growing up was?
Ferryboat Fred, which I don't know if it really exists.
I remember that show.
Yeah, my parents must hate the soundtrack from that thing, but it's a toss-up between that and Thomas the Tank Engine.
Oh, good. Yeah, no, I have not heard that name in a long time. Ferryboat Fred. Yeah, geez. Okay. I don't even know how the song would go, but maybe we need to find it just to really refresh my memory. So there you go. Speaking of songs, back on the music page, I might know the answer to this. If you had to do karaoke, what would you sing?
Well, at a young age, I decided to sing like a Cat Stevens song. So you can probably almost put that down to parental abuse. You can hear it. You obviously know what we used to listen to at home a lot on records. But probably go for the Men at Work one, because I think you can yell at one as loud as you want. It still sounds okay.
There's a nice balance there, like singing a bit of like Wild World versus some, Men at Work, or Father and Son or something like that. Like, kind of works.
Exactly. Like John Farnham's always a good one when you go to karaoke these days as well. There's plenty of yelling of those ones.
Exactly. You got to bring a bit of the Farnsy going. Farnsy or Barnsy.
No one does it sober, do they? It's expected that you've had a few.
Does anyone do karaoke sober? Like, I think people would be lying if they said they would.
In Japan, more people do it than you'd expect.
True. That is very, very true. When I was back in Hobart, they've got karaoke bars in Hobart now. It's taking off when Hobart's got karaoke bars. So, that's really taking off. If you could be an Olympian in any other sport besides your own, what would it be?
Well, branching into this winter sport kind of stuff, I thought maybe I had the potential to do one of these ski sports, but no, I always had a notion that it's sometimes better to be lucky than good in the sailing. But I think in those sports you actually do need to be good. But I'd love to be a triathlete as well. I admire those athletes immensely for the way that they can compete and push themselves to the absolute limit of their abilities. And I think that's the same reason a lot of those winter sports, those Nordic biathlons and stuff like that, you see them just ruin. And that's a mental strength that is not easy to develop, and I admire it a lot.
I'm a massive fan of any multiple discipline sports, triathlon's great. I love the modern pentathlon, Nordic combined, but like anything, like it's just it's hard enough doing one sport, let alone like, hey, let's combine a couple and do it all together. Like I think we talked that, I think in our sailing commentary, we're going to have like fencing on the sail, like have some duels going on, like out there, real Pirates of the Caribbean style. So you could have modern pentathlon are looking for a fifth discipline now that they're getting rid of the horse riding. So you could probably get sailing involved and do the fencing and the sailing at the same time. There you go.
I think they should do that. Give us a chance of another medal opportunity, like they do for Michael Phelps and all the other swimmers.
Yeah, exactly.
Unbelievable. Those guys walk away with 22 medals. But do you know how many years it would take us to have a crack at 22 medals in sailing?
How old did you say you were when you did the Sydney to Hobart? You need to go back to like Athens or something like that to get started, to have a remote chance of doing that. So, you're doing 10 races, did you say? I think you should get a medal for every race. During it. There you go. Then you could be like Michael Phelps.
I'll write a strongly worded letter, see if they'll hand them out afterwards. Exactly.
Come on. So I think this is the ISC's problem. It's all like, we've only got 300 medals we can give out. Oh, fuck it. Just make more. Come on.
They recycled iPhones. There should have been plenty.
Yeah, exactly. Come on. We want to see the medal tally. It's China, 412 gold medals, 307 silver, and 812 bronze. That's a fair medal tally. Why not?
Much better.
Helps them out. Will, before we let you go, we touched on before a little bit about Instagram, social media, anywhere people can follow you, stay up to date with what you got coming out. TikTok, are you on TikTok yet?
I am on TikTok. I don't have my own account, but I've seen myself in plenty of videos. No, I use Instagram, Will Ryan 100. That's kind of more my sporting profile that I occasionally manage to do things too. But I am always open to people that questions and things like that. I love to share as much as I can about my Olympic experience and pathways and opportunities into it for anyone who wants to kind of have that opportunity. So please reach out. Not the best updating photos, but it's on my very important list of things to do in the future.
Well, we'll keep an eye on that. And I honestly hope that the first thing you post on it when you get back to Australia one day is this large coffee. And wherever you got that medium coffee, if they're listening, like give them a plug. Were they like a local cafe or something like that? Like where did you get this? And I really hope they've got that large coffee ready for you.
No, well, if Jack's listening, I'm definitely coming to my local coffee shop back at home in Toronto at Cleaver. And yeah, make it an extra large if that's all right.
Extra large, yes.
It's been a long time since I've been home.
It's been a long time. You deserve it. Will, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate, for joining us here and Off the Podium. Best of luck with everything moving forward. And I'm sure we'll get you back on post-Paris once you've got that extra gold and you're joining Matt as the greatest Olympic sailor from Australia in the history of the Olympics.
Thanks very much, Ben, and thank you. And keep the good times coming. It's great listening to you and all the amazing athletes you get the chance to talk to. I'm very jealous, but I really enjoy listening. So thanks for having me.